Welcome back to Advocacy in Action, the official podcast of the Smart Health Benefits Association. I'm Caroline, president of SHBA. Our mission is to speak on behalf of employer plan sponsors, bringing a boots on the ground perspective to the policy table to help modernize our healthcare and financial systems for all of Canadians. Robin, today we're shifting our focus. We're going over to financial wellness. So, Robin, there are 9 million Canadians without a workplace retirement plan. When you sit down with a small business owner, how are you guiding them past the hesitation to help close that gap?
Yeah, and that's a really big number, Caroline. And I think the first thing to do is take away the intimidation factor. A lot of small and mid-sized employers hear retirement plan and they immediately think, oh, this is going to be expensive, it's going to be complicated, maybe admin heavy. And historically, you and I have both been in the business a long time. Maybe that was true, but that's not the case anymore. You can start small. You can start with a modest employer contribution. You can design something that fits the budget. And the platforms and products in the market today are so much easier to administer than they used to be. So when I'm sitting down with an employer, I'm trying to shift the conversation from this is a burden to this is totally achievable. And then the bigger point is really shifting employee behavior. So, payroll deduction works, employer matching works. And when you make saving automatic and give people a reason to participate, you really change outcomes over time. But I think, the fourth piece, and this is where the advocacy that we're going to be talking about today comes in, is that if we really want more small businesses to adopt these plans, we need to make it even easier for them to say yes. And that's where government incentives, tax credits, and policy support could make a real difference. So I'm really looking forward to digging into this today.
Me as well. Yeah, and we want to make it so that really employers can't say no, right? So
Exactly.
to yeah, and so exactly to talk about what we're doing and the work that we're doing, let's bring in Jarrett Zavitz. He's chair of our financial wellness working group, and Alex Mazer, a leading policy expert who helped architect the Retirement for All campaign. So let's bring in Jarrett. Jarrett, welcome. When SHBA takes an issue to Ottawa, we run it through our issue framework. Can you explain how your working group evaluated this need for such an employer boost?
Yeah, pleasure to be here. So basically, when our committee formed, there was consensus immediately. The biggest gap in the industry is group of retirement plans in place for smaller employers, right? For these small businesses, there's just not a lot of uptake there. Most of us in that group, being in the industry, we're already aware of the paper presented, the CD Howe paper, and we liked the proposal. But up to that point, it was something we had read and liked. That was about it. So really, with us HBA joining that, getting be part of this committee, it gave us an avenue to actively promote the proposal, which does help make these plans more affordable for employers. It provides the employees immediate improvement in their savings, in their retirement savings specifically, and it's not requiring any actual expense from the government. There's a tax incentive, a tax credit, but there's not actually any money outlay that they're having to put out to implement this.
Right. So, yeah, let's tied to that. Let's bring in Alex. Alex Mazer, welcome. You recently co authored a paper for the CD Howe Institute that laid out exactly what that incentive looks like. So, what is the policy we are putting in front of the government?
So the basic idea is how do we provide an incentive or a carrot for small and mid-sized businesses that are setting up a retirement plan for the first time? It's modeled after a policy that has had some pretty good traction in the US and has actually been one of the few things that both Republicans and Democrats could agree on, and has really helped to fuel the expansion of that small employer market. So the basic idea is that the tax credit would help cover the costs of setting up a plan. So everything from education to getting advice to choosing the right provider, dealing with whatever governance and legal issues you need to as part of setting up the plan. And the big part of the credit is really to cover the cost of employer matching because we think that's a great idea. So it would cover up to $1,000 per employee for most employees over the first 3 years of a plan, as well as up to 5,000 for the first 3 years to cover setup costs. That's the basic idea. The cost would be modest to the government. We think the benefit would be pretty significant, and it's one of these areas where it's hard to find an area that helps small business, helps middle class Canadians. It could help the government over time, relieve some cost pressure from programs like OAS. So we think it is one of those policies.
Mm. Yeah. And Alex, can you speak a little bit more to that? I think when we're sitting in front of government, I mean, it's early days, we're formulating the details, but why would the government do this? What would be the cost benefit? There's outlay of money, but over the long term, you mentioned OAS as an example. What are some deeper details you might offer in that regard as to why? Why would the government do this?
Well, I think it really does come back to helping the middle class, helping small business, and then helping relieve cost pressure. So there's three areas of where the government can win in the groups that they're trying to serve. Like Canadians are struggling, right? We know that especially people who are not in the top earners have struggled to save and build savings. And we know that workplace savings are one of the most effective ways to help people build wealth with the assist of an employer if it's a well-designed plan. So I think it'll really help middle class Canadians. Our small businesses, right? Our economy is not growing very fast. Our productivity is struggling. We need ways to help small business. We know that this will help attract and retain talent and make them more productive. That's a big win for our economy. We're trying to do everything we can to make our economy grow faster. And that's a huge priority for the government. And then lastly is the government's trying to figure out ways of reducing cost pressures. OAS is the biggest government program. We don't know what's going to happen with OAS, but there may be some reductions there, or at a very minimum, we should encourage people to save so that they are less dependent on government programs. And this is a great way to do that as well. So again, it's rare to find things that help with all three of those things at a relatively affordable price tag. And that's where this tax credit can come in.
Thanks, Alex. Jared, I want to come to you on this. Like, let's bring this down to the real client conversation. If I'm sitting with that CFO or that business owner tomorrow morning, they might like the idea of helping employees save, but they're probably thinking about, what's the cost? What's the admin burden? Whether people are actually going to use the plan. How should advisors position this so that it feels achievable, practical, and not one more burden for the employer?
Yeah, that's a good question. That kind of goes back to your points earlier, Robin, about systems weren't the best before, but systems have improved a lot to really take away that to lower that administrative burden, and that's been a huge benefit just with evolution of the industry and improvement in technology. So really, that's where we start with some of the conversation. Hey, this isn't hard to do, uh, but there are two other main barriers that we see, and it is cost, right? It's like, oh, how much is this going to cost me, as we discussed, and then I would say there's a lack of a nudge to get oh, this is that doesn't the cost isn't that bad. Oh, administration will be easier, but okay, cool, we'll think about it. And so we're missing that nudge to get the idea to action, and that's where it, this type of program can kind of introduce it for us. It gives that little boost needed. Uh, you know, okay, cool. That really decreases the cost outlay that it'll be because we're going to get some of it back, and now we have a reason to implement now. So you can increase the employee's total compensation immediately and affordably. Like what a great sell to a small business, either their HR or the CFO or the owner, right? For a lot of these small business, that's all the same person.
Jared, whenever I think about nudging a client, I'm gonna be thinking about you from here on in, because that's a great way to put it. Alex, I'm gonna come back to you because I'd love to just dive a little bit further into the advocacy piece. A lot of advisors will support this, I'm sure, but they might not think of themselves as people who talk to policymakers. But realistically, we're the ones sitting with employers every day, so we actually have a really important perspective, I think. If an advisor had 5 minutes with their local MP, how should they go about explaining the issue and the opportunity in a simple, nonpartisan way? What's the best approach?
Well, just to back up one step, Robin, in my old role, I mean, now I'm working with a provider, right? In Commonwealth in the market. But before I used to work in a policy role and rarely heard the voice of the advisor, rarely heard the voice of the small sponsor in forming retirement policy. And I think it's really, really important because it represents the majority of Canadians. So I think the first thing to be aware of is that you may not be an expert in policy, but you have a really important voice as somebody who works with small and mid-sized employers in that MP's riding day in, day out. And MPs love hearing about what's going on with businesses and organizations in their riding. So I would start by sort of talking about the work you do, the kinds of clients you represent, and kind of reinforcing the importance of having that voice at the table. That would be number one. And then I think number two is being an advocate for the employees. The fact that a lot of people are struggling to save and build wealth. People might not hear, an MP might not hear about that on the doorstep. because people might be a little bit ashamed that they're behind when it comes to retirement savings. They don't raise it, but it's an underlying issue and concern for many, many Canadians, as we see over and over again in surveys. And I think as someone who works day to day with employees on their financial wealth and their well being, you can be a voice for those middle class Canadians as well that MPs are really interested in hearing about. And then I think last and not least is um, just educating people on the problem itself, right? The 9 million Canadians that don't have a plan, the hundreds of thousands of small businesses that don't have a plan, and how this is linked to issues of both middle class well being, but also our competitiveness and our productivity in the economy. Creating those links, I think, for MPs to the issues that they're talking about every day at the caucus and cabinet tables is a really important role. And we try to do some things together in making that advocacy easier. You don't have to be an advocacy expert. We've got some tools to allow you to use your voice as an advisor in raising these issues and bringing them forward and really being that advocate, because that's what advisors are, right? They're advocates for their clients. And it's just another form of that advocacy that they do.
Alex, thank you for taking that highlighter and underlining how important this voice is. I certainly, in the early days of the Smart Health Benefits Association, when we did work with, first pharmacare, now we're at the table with Alberta Bill 11. Now we're advocating here. It continues to be reinforced to me how valuable this voice is in those shoes for MPs and for any advisors out there. I think about even myself and others. If you've never done advocacy work before, it really is just speaking to what you know, and that is the boots on the ground, the people that you sit across from. So, and together, this is how we'll make a difference. We've got affordable, easy to use products that our industry has built. And now it's a matter of having this collaboration and this advocacy to get employers support and that nudge, that boost to implement. So I want to say over to our listeners, if you want to read the policy details and learn more about this topic and the advocacy work we're doing, please do visit retirementforall.ca, and that will put that link in the show notes. And to the advisors listening, we need your voice. Yes, you can tune in and hear about the great work we're doing, but you're someone that's sitting province to province, large city, small town. We need you to join. We need to make this voice louder and stronger in all parts of Canada to make a difference. So please tap that link in our show notes. Join the Smart Health Benefits Association today, very reasonable pricing, and you'll get access not only to our working group intelligence, but you'll start to stand with us as we advocate for the future of Canadian benefits. So let's get this done together. And thanks everyone for tuning in. Thank you to Alex and Jared as being our guests today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you. Great to be here.